lot of us have heard the same practicing tips over and over again over the years that just haven't worked, including following the same perfect practice routine every day, never wasting any time in the practice room, making sure you're as efficient as possible, practicing 40 hours a day, or just to try harder. Nothing's stopping you. Why don't you just do it? It's not that this advice doesn't necessarily have merit, but it doesn't work for everyone, and it certainly didn't work for me. If you're anything like me, having heard years and years of unhelpful advice has kind of been bad for my self-esteem and made me think that I couldn't be a musician for a long time. Since my ADHD diagnosis and discovering my sensory sensitivities, I've realized that my brain just needs different strategies. Hey, my name's Evelyn, and today I'll be breaking down 8 strategies on how to practice as a neurodivergent musician. A quick disclaimer before I get into it, these tips don't encompass like every neurotype out there. It's really only what I've experienced and what's worked for me. So if you have learning disabilities or OCD or something like that, this isn't necessarily going to apply to you, but I think there's a lot of overlap between conditions sometimes. And make sure that you take this with a grain of salt, since I'm not a professional. I'm just someone with a spicy little brain out there in the music world trying to make my way. So yeah, just had to get that out there. Please reach out to a licensed professional for advice. Number 1, have a variety of goal setting methods at your disposal. With ADHD in particular, it is really difficult to just keep up one specific goal setting method. I find that really everything has a 100% fail rate. not immediately, but like every little planner I've tried, every specific time management thing I've tried usually eventually falls through. So instead of forcing one method to work for me all the time, instead I use a variety of different methods and kind of switch between them. The goal setting methods that I usually alternate between are setting time-related goals and accomplishment-related goals. So for example, a time-related goal would be, I'm going to practice for 30 minutes today. But an accomplishment-related goal would be, I'm going to get this 2-line chunk of this piece done today. I usually set a time-related goal when I need to just spend a certain amount of time getting acclimated to my instrument. So if I need to improvise over a new set of changes in jazz, I might just set a goal to work on that for 15 minutes. And other times when I start thinking that that's stupid or inefficient, like I often do, I'll aim to just learn a certain chunk of a piece. And sometimes I'll have a time frame that I've set that for, but usually it's just like, okay, today I'm gonna learn these 2 lines. And rather than worrying about the time it takes, I'll just stop practicing when the task is done. The same thing applies for really any time management techniques, so like the Pomodoro method, things like that. One method isn't gonna work all the time, so it's good to know the variety of tools that you have. Maybe even write them down on a sheet of paper so you can keep track of them when you're having a particularly hard time getting yourself to practice effectively or practice at all. And number 2, set small goals. On the topic of goal setting, it's really important for me to make practicing feel as low pressure as possible. And I do that by setting small goals. Sometimes picking up the instrument and playing a scale is enough to be a large victory for a day. So you don't really need to practice for an hour or 2 all the time, at least I don't, to be proud of yourself. Maybe set a goal just to play 5 days a week, whatever it looks like. And this is especially helpful to get out of a practicing drought or just a long period of time when you don't pick up the instrument at all. I write these goals down in a notebook or on a whiteboard. I prefer a whiteboard just because I can't lose track of a whiteboard the same way I can a notebook if it's literally like stapled into my wall. I found that often starting is the most difficult part. I know people say this constantly, but it really is. And just setting achievable expectations really helps. If you know you're gonna succeed every time you pick up the instrument because your goals are small, then you're probably more likely to pick it up in the first place. Number 3, organize your music in the laziest and easiest to access way possible. I can't tell you how many times I've avoided practicing just because I don't know where my music is. I don't know if anyone else has this problem, but especially with sheet music, there are just loose pages floating around all around my house and I don't really know where they are. I've started trying to keep my music in bins or in folders. No organization system is gonna be perfect, but I tried to find a way to use the resources that I have to make something that's workable. Even just using cardboard boxes or old school folders can help make your music more accessible, easy to see, just organized in a way that isn't overwhelming when you try to practice. Full disclosure, this one is still really difficult for me. I try not to shame myself for being messy, but I believe organization will help alleviate a lot of my stress. And number 4, use a timer, alarm, or a stopwatch. A physical one, specifically, not one on your phone. Since I started using a physical timer instead of my phone to keep track of my practice, I've noticed how helpful it is to move a distraction out of the room. I'll plan how long I want to practice at a time, maybe like 25 or 30 minutes or so before a break, And then when it beeps, I'll take a break. Since I can lose track of time really easily, this helps me stay on track. I can never really get distracted for longer than the timer will go because there's something annoying beeping at me, and then I'll be like, oh shoot, I got distracted. Also, hearing that little beep at the end of a practice session is really gratifying, and it's kind of like checking something off of a to-do list. Number 5, use ear filters. To my bros with sensory issues, it is possible that your own practice could be overwhelming you. I honestly didn't realize this until I started using them. I am able to practice for so much longer now that I have a barrier between me and the sound, especially when it comes to like shrieking high notes, altissimo, like really loud sections. I've also noticed that my playing has gotten a little bit more loud and confident and gotten more air behind it. I think just because I was overwhelmed by loud noises, now that I have earbuds in, my tone has really improved, which I know sounds weird. Like, you'd think it would get worse if you couldn't really hear exactly what you were playing, but now that I'm less afraid to make a big noise that really fills the room, I've noticed some improvement there. So a little tip there. I use ear filters from Vibes and also from Etymonic. They're not always comfortable over a long period of time, but they're pretty decent. I've noticed that I can also sometimes use headphones without any music playing through them, or just earbuds that are usually used for music. If you're using it for ear protection though, make sure you check how many decibels that they cancel out before you use something that's not really meant for noise canceling. And one more thing, they really help block out distracting noises from other rooms. So if someone else in the house is making a lot of noise or cooking or cleaning or something, they help block out those background noises and keep me zoned in. Number 6, set boundaries with your own time. Even though routines can fall through a lot of the time, I find that it's really important to find a specific part of the day when you can usually practice, especially if it's after an activity that you already have set in place every day or a habit that you're used to. It's really helpful to have something stable to work around and a specific time frame when you're used to practicing. Do you always eat dinner at the same time? Maybe practice before or after then. Any kind of mindless, pre-existing habit works really well to pair with a practicing routine. And this goes the other way as well when you're talking about over-practicing or getting distracted. Maybe you hyperfocus and have trouble stopping practicing. I have an alarm on my phone that goes off at a certain time each day when I know I have to start getting ready for bed, and this really helps me to notice when I've gotten off track or really immersed in something. Number 7, take care of your body. It can be really hard for many of us to keep track of our bodily health, and especially because a lot of neurodivergent people have underlying health conditions or other things that make practicing difficult. I found that just writing out or mentally noting the physical sensations and symptoms that distract me from practicing really helps address distractions and the discomforts that I didn't even know I had. If you need to eat before you play, make sure you keep snacks nearby. Go to the bathroom before you practice if that's gonna get in the way. Any kind of stretching routines. I have like a short stretching routine for my wrist and hands and shoulders that keeps me from getting a lot of pain when I have a neck strap on or I'm kind of slouched over a piano for a long period of time. And also, when I get cold, I can't focus. So I always have like hoodies, sweatshirts nearby. And number 8, accept yourself. Love yourself. It is okay to spend time playing around. It's okay to have fun, improvise, and mess around as well as practice. You owe it to no one to be perfect. It is really hard to relieve yourself of neurotypical expectations when you're not neurotypical, but just remember that you deserve to experience joy in your musical life. Playing an instrument or singing isn't just about improvement, it's also about discovery and exploration. Your practice can look however you want and need it to. That's all for now. If you have any tips that worked for you, please drop them in the comments below. Accommodating yourself is a process and not an overnight thing. Even implementing one small trick to make your life 1% easier is a win. So go forth and make great art.